Welcome to the Infosys Healthcare and Life Sciences Perspectives, the podcast and video interview series with thought leaders.
Welcome to the fireside chat on state of healthcare, digital health, health IT, whatever you call it. So I have here with me Abhishek Singh. Abhishek is a good friend, and he is VP at Everest Consulting Group. So Abhishek, why don't you take a moment and talk about yourself?
Sure. I think since the topic is healthcare, so it makes sense for me to be talking about the fact that when I started off at Everest Group, it was with a focus to incubate the healthcare research practice here. Prior to that, I spent almost close to a decade on the supply side. And there was a desire in me to kind of move to the demand side and try looking at how different industries, specifically healthcare, look about technology and how they want to adopt it, how they work with suppliers, etc. So that give me a nudge to kind of move to the other side, the advisory and research side. And here I am. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce myself.
Sure. Thanks, Abhishek. And my name is Amit Shukla. I am a health IT enthusiast first, and I also run sales and strategy for healthcare within Infosys. So Abhishek, healthcare IT and digital health has come a long way.
Yeah, hasn't it? I mean, back in the days wherein we were just about talking about integration of databases, creating enterprise data layer, to this day wherein digital technologies themselves have become that default channel which healthcare companies, both payers and providers, want to use as they reach out and work with their own customers, patients, and employer groups, etc. So it's an interesting world out there. These days, we are talking more about telehealth, AI, health technology, platforms, and whatnot. I mean, there are so many things for us to be confused about. Since you are still on the practitioner side now, leading such a large business, would want to hear from you as to how you are seeing some of these technology tenets playing out in your client spaces where you work with them.
Yeah, sure. In fact, healthcare is hard and digital health is harder. But the way I look at it is that if you have to really simplify it, all the digital health initiatives, whether it's telehealth or cloud or AI or in any of the newer technologies that are coming up and the investments that are going into digital health, they all are trying to solve what they call triple aims of healthcare. How do you improve the healthcare for the individual? How do you really figure out a way to deliver better care to the population? And how do you reduce the cost? These are essentially the three broad aims which healthcare companies as well as the digital health companies are trying to address. I'll just take a very simple example. I was talking to the chief operating officer of a large healthcare payer organization, and they were talking about customer engagements, and their perspective was, while some of these new technologies and new channels have come up in terms of portals or some of the other mechanisms, web interface or something what you have on your mobile, but they still look at customer service as still the primary way by which consumers, especially the members, are engaging with their healthcare insurance companies. So Abhishek, my question to you would be, since Everest, you guys do a lot of consulting to larger organizations on really balancing their budgets on both the sides, on the legacy side as well as on investment on the transformational initiatives. Now, what are you seeing in the market?
There are two questions primarily here. One is reducing cost itself, because healthcare deals with cost in a very different manner. It's one of the largest spend areas within US. So that's one aspect that most enterprises think and live and breathe every day. The second aspect is looking at the efficacy of the technology costs that they are deploying. How much it is giving them a return on investment is also a question a lot of clients end up dealing with. Most of my conversations in the last 18 months, and specifically so during COVID, has been around audit of the SG&A cost as well as the medical costs that payers and providers kind of end up accruing. And how can technology play a role in improving, one, the efficiency of it, and also bring the overall level of costs down? And hence, when I talk about the enterprise vendor interactions, most of it is now veering towards how we talk about not only unit cost of spend, but also total cost of ownership of a lot of services implementations that they are putting in place, platforms that they are putting in place. And last but not the least, this whole new ecosystem that is developing of big technology companies, Amazon, Salesforce, Microsoft, all investing in healthcare with a very strong focus, which is creating a problem of plenty for enterprises. So it's a good problem to have. In many ways, you can help solve for a lot of cost related issues, but then again, it becomes a very complex issue for customers to be thinking about.
Great. So Abhishek, any final thoughts on advice to first advice to healthcare organizations, and then advice to service providers?
When it comes to advice to enterprises is that while they need to maintain the focus around patient-centric technologies, it's the digital plumbing, things that sit at the back office and the mid office that need to be fixed first, whether it's regulation, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's your legacy platforms that you have in the mix that needs to get fixed. And obviously the data integration needs to happen alongside the data discipline aspect that keeps getting discussed. So that's one. From the perspective of service providers, and I think that's where the key opportunity will come in, is as we are talking about the sprawl of technology within the ecosystem of CIOs. So they are dealing with large tier vendors, they are dealing with EMR vendors, they are dealing with big tech and SaaS companies. The orchestration of that is going to be the biggest challenge that their key CIOs are going to face, especially the large ones in the healthcare ecosystem. So for you, as Infosys or other service providers who I deal with, my strongest suggestion is to build a strong orchestration story, because some of this headache that CIOs need to solve for in trying to build that best-in-class operating model will have a strong bearing on how service providers come in and play that central role in managing all of these different pieces of the ecosystem, whether it's cloud, data, and different platforms.
Very true. In fact, from my perspective, healthcare is now moving into a stage where, as you talked about, they have to focus on these plumbing based initiatives. They have to focus on security, making sure that end of the day PHI and security and assurance of your data to your end consumers is not going to go anywhere. Absolutely. So great conversation. Abhishek, I wish we were really doing it at one of our annual analyst meeting in person somewhere in a hotel. But I think these technologies have come a long way. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yes, it's the next best thing to being face to face, and obviously something like a glass of wine or a cup of coffee would have made a lot of difference. But let's make best of what we have, and I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, Abhishek.